And you propose criminalizing parents with severely disabled infants to well gratify your sense of moral superiority. It seems.
Is it moral superiority to just be moral? I'm just not quite willing to give you a pass on it. So, baby comes out of womb, and parents don't want baby. In your worldview, it's okay for the baby to be exterminated.
Yes, if your parents don't want you, your life isn't worth living, is it?
Yeah, I still think it is. Yeah, why wouldn't it be?
Because nobody will care about you enough to want to care about you, to look after you and spend resources and energy on you.
Wait, back up. You think that if you're born, your parents don't want you. Don't you have these cool things called adoption agencies?
We're talking about children, we're talking about infants with severe birth defects,
Okay,
not
so
not.
let's assume that they don't have severe birth defects and the
Well,
parents
then
want
obviously adoption is the option, but what I'm talking here about infants with severe birth
them.
defects.
Okay, right, got it. So let's get back to this. Let's assume that the infant is born without severe birth defects and the parents still don't want them. And at that point, you would say, okay, those kids should be put up for adoption, right?
Sure.
Okay, so why are we giving more moral consideration to the kids who are born without defects than the kids who are born with them?
Well, because I'm thinking about the parents. I mean, the job of the parent is hard enough, even with normal children, right? Do you have children?
I do. I have five.
So it would be difficult to bring up a child that you know will never live an independent life.
No,
Why
it's
would
not
you
that
wish?
difficult. I have one now with severe autism. And yeah, it's challenging, but I most certainly would not have exterminated her when she came out of the womb. That
Well, you
seems
wouldn't
to me
know
to
that.
be absolutely morally repugnant, and I don't understand how it can be justified.
Well, you wouldn't know that an infant is autistic until, well, at what age did you discover that?
I believe it was right around one or two. But let's assume that you could have discovered it right out of the womb. That would be considered in your worldview to be a severe disability, wouldn't it?
Well, autism, I know people who seem okay, and then later they tell me they have autism. So I guess, as they say, autism is on a wide spectrum, and it
Yeah. Okay.
depends
Well, let's
on,
just say it's at the severe end of the spectrum.
well, it's up to the parents.
Well, right. So this is where I'm trying to get trying to get the conversation to because I'm trying to figure this out. If it's up to the parents just based on the fact that they have a disability, so they no longer want the kid, and in your worldview, the kid should be killed rather than remanded to the state, trying to figure out why you give more moral consideration to a kid who's not severely disabled versus a child who is.
Well, because a child that is normal and healthy would have potential adoptive parents, while a child that is suffering from severe disability would not.
Okay, so what would be considered severe disability in your worldview? Missing an arm or a leg, would that be a severe disability?
Possibly, it depends on what kind, what the parent wants. I mean, some people. I mean, I know some parents. Well, if the sex is wrong, they would abort it. So it's up to the parent.
Do you think that it should be up to the parent to kill the child out of the womb if the sex was incorrect?
No, that is what the Quran in fact forbids.
Okay, got it. So this is I'm sorry to stay on this, but I'm just not done investigating it just yet. So this is why I'm asking if a child comes out with a missing leg, and you said it depends, it's up to the parent. Surely a child with a missing leg can go on to live a very fulfilled life. So why?
And it could be put up for adoption.
Sure, yeah. So I'm trying to figure out what type of severe disability are we talking about, where you would make the determination that it's okay for the child to be killed outside the womb after it's born.
The infant, um, okay, the worst thing would be, I suppose, if it's quadriplegic and can't lift its head, and is deaf and blind.
Okay, deaf and blind. What if you're just blind? Would that be enough, or just deaf? If the
Well,
parent if the
children with
parent didn't
disability,
want you, if the parent didn't want you, is what I'm asking. So you're born blind. Your
you can
mom and
adopt
dad are
them.
like, "Fuck that kid. I want that kid to be like dunked in a bottle, in some fucking water and drown or starve to death or whatever." Would that be enough?
There is the option of adoption. It, you can always try that, yeah.
Okay,
But
but
some
what I'm
parents choose not to.
right. So what I'm
And I
saying is that
often
within
wonder,
your moral estimation, if a child's born blind, completely blind, mommy and daddy say, "Don't want that kid," right? I would prefer that you starve the kid to death, right? Because
I don't know
that
why you're concentrating on the method as if there were some sadistic pleasure to be taken from the method of its disposal.
well, I think
In
that
the olden
methodology
days,
and
it would be left to the midwife, right? The midwife would know what to do.
right. So the midwife could just snuff it out with her hand if she wanted to, right? Because who cares whether it's starving? Why don't I just cut the fucking kid's head off, right? Because the method doesn't matter. There's no moral consideration to be given to the method in which the kid's exterminated, right?
Well, it should be done in the most painless way possible,
So,
obviously.
so what if we discovered that the guillotine was the most painless way? Should you just slap the infant
Well,
in the
you
guillotine? like,
well,
like
there's no need. There's no need to guillotine the baby, is there? I mean,
well,
you're just thinking of
what
increasingly
if it's the most
bizarre and
painless way?
sadistic
It's not.
methods
Yeah. Well,
in order
what if
to
it's totally
demonize me,
painless?
aren't
What
you?
what
You're thinking of all these bizarre, sadistic.
I'm not thinking bizarre sadistic. What I'm saying
Well,
is that by
you
I'm
were the
using
one
your
talking about
logic.
guillotining the baby.
Yeah. What about your logic though of the most painless? So I just say, what if the
Well,
guillotine was the most
I would
painless?
leave it to the midwife to decide.
So the midwife's going to decide how the baby gets snuffed out. But in your
I'm sure she has
estimation,
her methods.
gotcha. But in your estimation, if the child is born totally blind, parents don't want the child, then it's perfectly acceptable for a midwife to snuff
No,
that child off the face of the planet,
not
right?
really, because the midwife might know some adoption agencies, where, where parents might want to adopt a blind child. You never know. So I don't think being blind is a severe enough disability to justify. No, it wouldn't. You see, it's subjective. It's really up to the parent. It's up. You know, it's up
No,
to
I
the
don't.
parent.
Well, I don't think it is up to the parent. I don't think that the parent should have a right to be able to assassinate their kid outside the womb,
Well,
even
assassinate
even
again.
staunch
You're using
abortion.
the wrong word.
No, I'm not saying the wrong
Assassination
word.
only
It's a
happens
fucking.
to
It's an
politicians.
assassination. You're
No,
directing
no,
somebody
listen.
to
You're
kill
using
another
the
human
wrong word.
being.
You only assassinate politicians.
No, you don't only assassinate politicians. Anybody can be assassinated.
Well,
Okay,
execute if you're going to put it that way. But execution would mean,
that's a
after
punishment.
you've been
Yeah,
convicted,
that's a
after you've been
punishment.
tried.
Yeah, that's different.
It's
What I'm
not a
saying to you,
punishment.
this is very
It's not a
important.
punishment, is
It's
it?
very
It's not intended to
I
be
didn't
a
say it was
punishment.
well, whether it's certainly a punishment for the child.
The child would know one way
The
or the
child
other.
wouldn't know. I mean, how would you know that the child wouldn't know if the hand of the midwife
How
went
would you know
over?
it would know? I mean, it doesn't know anything.
Well,
You
I mean,
know,
we can only assume based on experience. So the thing is like,
well, we've
look,
never
the
been a
baby.
disabled child snuffed out.
Okay, so backing up, let's just make sure I got this right. This is why I want this distinction drawn out because I think that you actually believe that in your worldview that it's absolutely okay to snuff out a child whether they have the disability or not, and you just use the disability as a crux to say that you think it's okay.
My attitude would be similar to what the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans.
Let them die of
Um,
exposure.
you again concentrate on the method, but
But that's what they did, right? They let them die of
when
exposure.
the Greeks, there would be a special place because in Greek mythology you hear about some shepherd picking up the abandoned infant of a king, such as Paris. So, obviously, in those days, there was a kind of appointed place. If you want to lose a baby, if you want to find a baby, there is a certain place outside the city that you would go. So that was how it was done.
No, I'm with you. So in your estimation, do you think that that was okay? That if you just didn't want to have a baby anymore, you would take it out to the place where it would just die of exposure, right? Or regardless what the methodology is, maybe they gave it some special herb and it went to sleep and it just never woke up, or whatever the fuck you want to say. But you think it's okay to take a little baby out that you just don't want, regardless of if there was disabilities or not. They just didn't want the baby, and it's okay for them to, leave it out there and let the fucking wolves have it, right?
Well, if push came to shove, yeah.
Okay, so now we've got to the heart of it. So I'm just glad that you didn't lean on the crux of disability, because I just don't think that you really believe that. And I think that now we've got to the heart of what you do believe, which is that parents have dominion over whether or not a child can be killed outside of the womb based on whether or not they want the child.
Well, if abortion is legal, why not infanticide?
Right. So you do believe in infanticide. So why'd you lie to me, Claire, and say that you
I
didn't?
didn't lie. I didn't lie. I gave you the circumstances in which I think it is acceptable.
It is acceptable to have infanticide. Excuse me. Sorry,
Particularly,
but I'm
yeah,
just
yeah,
saying.
that is what I'm saying. I know you're trying to demonize me, and this isn't really the subject that we're supposed to be discussing. But that's fine. If you think you can
Isn't this
ambush me
part?
on the
Isn't this
subject, I'm
part? Wait, wait,
perfectly,
wait, wait.
I'm
If this is part
perfectly
of your
happy
belief structure for secular Koranism, then why the hell shouldn't we be discussing it?
because it's not.
It's not.
No. Let me just think of how to phrase it.
Okay.
My subjective feelings about what degree of disability I would accept is neither here nor there. We're just talking about the law, and indeed, it's actually quite difficult to police these things, because if a mother decided she didn't want her infant, then she would get rid of it, whether it was legal or not.
So then we're not just talking about the law.
There is the grey area between morality and legality. So legality puts up a wall saying you can't, if you go beyond this, you're a criminal. But there's a thin
Okay.
line between.
So the thing is that back to where we're at, when it comes to infanticide and your belief that infanticide is indeed correct, and that is indeed part of your worldview as a secular Koranist, why do you think it's inappropriate for me to bring that worldview up as a starting point for where that would deviate from a society that I would advocate for, which is based under moral Christian ethics, where such barbaric activities as infanticide were never allowed?
Well, Christians did practice infanticide. If you do remember seeing any Victorian dramas when the midwife would be asking the father if he wanted to save the child or the mother. Are you aware that these practices existed in Victorian
Are you
Christian times?
are you aware of a book called the Malfarious Maleficarium?
Nope.
The Malfarious Maleficarium was a book that was written in the same times that you're talking about. That was a guide for how to hunt down and kill witches. That's what it was for.
In
And
Victorian times, I don't think they
guess,
hunted
guess what
witches.
they considered. I didn't say Victorian times. I
I
said
was talking about
same.
Victorian times.
Okay, but what I'm telling you is that midwives who snuffed out children's lives were considered witches, and Christians burned them at the stake, literally.
Well, we know there was a lot of persecution of men and women, and
Well, I don't know how
that
much
would be called witch
persecution it would
hunts.
be if the midwife was just snuffing out the child. It sounds like it
Well,
was due and proper.
then you wouldn't be asking such a woman to be your midwife, would you? But the fact
Well,
is,
you would
historically,
ask for such a
no,
woman to
no,
be your midwife.
historically, midwives would be women of good character, whom the women would trust to do the right thing after they've had a word with um, the mother's preferences. That was how it was done.
Right. And if the mother's preference was to snuff out the child and the midwife snuffed out the child, you could understand why Christians would consider that to be an evil action, right?
I rather think not, because
You
In
rather
those
think not.
days, I don't think parents would want to be so censorious and totalitarian because they might themselves have a defective infant that they might not wish to bring up. So if they didn't want to be forced to bring up the severely disabled infant, as you seem to be advocating, they wouldn't want it to do. They
Well,
would do
wait,
it to other people.
you don't just believe that the infant has to be severely disabled, though. You think that it's okay to do it even if the infant's not severely disabled. If
Do
abortion's
what?
legal under your
Do what
guidelines,
exactly? I've already explained to you that personally, I would not. I would reject a severely disabled infant. I don't really know what sort of disability that I would or wouldn't accept. But the point is that it's different for different people, and you propose criminalizing parents with severely disabled infants to well gratify your sense of moral superiority. It seems.
is it moral superiority to just be moral, or is
Well,
morality
morality is
always
a
superior?
well. If people think that if people disagree with your proposal to criminalize them if they don't want to bring up their severely disabled infant, then they would disagree with your morality. And
Then
in
they
fact, there is no necessity to flaunt your moral superiority
So
in
under
this way.
your what you're really saying then is that people who are immoral would consider you morally superior, rightly so.